Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is my presentation, Nightclub Color Splash, Simple Analog Multimedia Lighting Presentations. I'm from Kate and Sam Lighting Designers, and day to day as lighting designers, we're always trying to use color, lighting effects, and texture to enhance space. And as lighting designers, with the careful, considered application of light, color, intensity, texture, and despite the architecture, us lighting designers can totally transform the mood, look, and feel of a space. And then with lighting controls, you can make that change happen over an hour, or you can make that change happen in an instant. And this is the wonderful power of lighting designers. So to give you a feel of some of the work that Kate and Sam Lighting Designers has done before, this was a project in Cardiff, Oaxaca, Cardiff, and here the use of colour and texture was used to create the effect of a sun, which changed slowly, dynamically over time. Another example where we kind of splashed colour into a space was in a bar in the Hilton, Dublin, again using blue light and warm light to create contrast and then using blue LED technologies to create that effect. Another example of where we're using coloured lighting in an installation, this was a barrel ride in Edinburgh, and as you rode through the space, we used colour and texture to help inform the story of how whiskey was made. So colour and light were all becoming an integral part of the storytelling experience for this space. Another example, this is where we were using neon technology. Again, coloured light splashed around the space to draw the idea of spaghetti and to help tell passerbys, restaurant people coming to dine in the restaurant, what the restaurant was about. Again, here we were using effects and mirrors and multicoloured lights in the floor and integrated into pods to help enhance the experience of the Sweet History of York Experience Centre. In retail, this is where we're just using texture and little gobos inside little fairy houses to help, take the children away from just a retail experience, a little bit of theatre. Again, lighting design, lighting used to help enhance and lift the experience of an interior. And then here, this is a hotel in Paris, Paris Opera, and here we were just simply using gobo projectors to create or suggest the idea of light blasting in to an interior. So there's a flavour of some of the projects that Kate and Sam have done where colour, lights and texture have been kind of integral to, we think, to the experience of the interior and the people's experience within the spaces. So why is this presentation relevant? So I think at this point now, with LED technology, lighting controls, display technology, TVs everywhere, it's kind of considered easy to create these interactive multimedia and fabulous lighting installations. We're all too kind of familiar with that experience of walking down the road or being in an interior where we've got these lights shouting for our attention, saying, look at me, bright red flashing here, Piccadilly Circus. And I think to some extent we've become a bit, say, blasé or a bit complacent of the technical, digital and coloured lighting. And there was a time when it wasn't quite so easy to create those effects and create those experiences. I've also noticed that at the moment there is a trend towards the retro, the vintage. People are looking for a simpler way of doing lighting. We don't want to have all these wires and all this technology. And seeing what I've been seeing in fashion with the sort of resurgence of vinyl, the tape cassette, old games consoles being re-immersed on the market. These styles and these graphic designs reminded me of what I used to do, what got me into lighting right in the beginning. And I thought it would be interesting to show and share people how my love of lighting, where it started. So almost like a little craft session in lighting design. It's a little bit reminiscent, I apologize, but maybe after 25 years doing this, maybe I'm allowed just a few minutes to reminisce and share what I used to do. So where did it all start? Okay, so Kate and Sam Lighting Designers. Kate, my business partner, she started in rock and roll, and she's toured with lots of famous rock and roll bands. She could tell you about what they used to do, but I think there's a sort of an ethical saying, what goes on tour stays on tour, so I don't know how interesting that would be as a presentation. However, for me, my passion in lighting started when I was at university. During the days when I was at college, I was already playing with light bulbs and light effects. Here we have a gutter with its fluorescent tubes at the time integrated into the gutter, and then this idea of light bulbs coming out, suggesting light or light as water. Here, this was what I called it a portable sky. And the idea was that in the future, when we all live underground, that you could pull out this slice of sky and experience some sky, all using simple technology. And this here was simply a line of water dropping from a hole in the ceiling through a hole in the floor. But I was quite interested in the built environment and what made the world that we live in. However, while I was studying, there was another student there, and she told me about a man that she was working with in the evenings to earn some extra money. And he was called Carlos Rodriguez, and he was this crazy, eccentric South American man who would proudly go around town. I was studying in Brighton, claiming to be the oldest Mohican in Brighton. I am the oldest Mohican in Brighton, and he was delighted that he was the oldest man with a Mohican in Brighton. And as his little outfit was called Lanterna Magica, and as the name suggests, the specialism that he did was to project images and effects as a little business. And this was in nightclubs and at events that we would do this. So it's almost like a kind of an artisanal approach to lighting. It wasn't very technical. It was very lo-fi, very artisanal. So over and above the existing house lighting, Lanterna Magica provided a creative layer of lighting projections and lighting effects. We set up and operated temporary multimedia lighting installations. So at this time, I was just busy whacking around in university in the studio, making light boxes and playing with light bulbs. So this was a whole new world to me, this idea of projection and idea of color. So we had the DJs at the time all scratching and mixing their music in the nightclubs. We were like an analog visual disc jockey. Okay, we used simple tools. Right, at that time, automated lighting was well established. Yeah, luminaires with pan, tilt, rotate from mirrors. They were well developed now. Clubs had in-house lighting systems, and color was from dichroic glass, and direction of beam was controlled with a flipping mirror inside the luminaire. But for image projection and for texture projection that was suitable for a sort of a nightclub, a temporary event lighting, there was no such technology, really. You had the big old cathode ray televisions, and you had these things called jumbo projectors, which weren't good for sort of a temporary, quick lighting interactive installation. Also, I didn't have access to these technologies at the time. I was just a university student. So, the palette of tools that we used to work with, oil effects. You can still buy these now. These are great little projectors. We had a selection of oil effects. Now, the way these work, you've got different colored oils inside a disc, and the disc sort of turns in front of the lens, and you get to cast these lovely patterns on the wall. And what's quite nice about them is they're not digital. They're just sort of actually happening. They're real, they're like the material, and you're getting these lovely changes and colors happening. The other device we had was the Super 8 film projector, which is this little mini device which I've got here, and 16mm projectors, which is for projecting movies. And we had a box full of a collection of eclectic movies, just sort of random movies that we had to choose from when we were doing our choosing our projectors, building up our multimedia installation. And quite often what we would do, we would find an interesting bit of the movie, say where Mickey Mouse is running into the wall and exploding, or where a cat is falling off of a cliff, and we would splice the bits of movie together. So you start to get a repeating sort of animated light projection happening on the wall. So that starts to become and form part of your multimedia lighting installation. Next, the good old slide projector. Now vintage. I didn't realize this until I was starting my presentation. They've stopped making these in 2004. They come in all shapes and sizes. If you look on eBay, some look pretty cool. But what we would use were these type of slide projectors. They had carousels, and you could have 80 or 140 slides in the top, so 140 images that you could choose from. And these were good because they were easy to control. You had a forward button and a backward button, and there were lots of options in terms of the optics. So depending on the space that we ended up with, we could have a different size lens or a different size focus. So in a big space, we had a different lens. In a small space, you obviously fit the appropriate lens. And you could also operate them remotely, or you could put them on automatically. So they were quite a useful tool for our purposes. But all of the technologies basically work the same, where you have the lamp at the back, some glass to stop the heat damaging what you're projecting through. Then you have your image material and your projector lens, then the image gets sort of chucked out onto the screen or the surface. And I've got some slides here, but these were the sort of the key, or what were essential to the experience that we tried to create. Okay, so we had or Carlos, I should say, had a massive library of images that we could choose or work with. It was an eclectic collection of images and styles, which he'd built up over time. There was animals and nature, religious iconography, architectural images, architectural landscapes, famous characters, famous people, textures and patterns, fashion and youth culture. So depending on the type of event that we were doing, we would have a light box, and we would put together the carousels. We'd create these image collections that we would project up. We would also create custom content. So we used the slides from the event, and we would cut them up and we'd make them into little pictures. I see I haven't got very long. We would work with making our own slides up. We would do a lot thinking about the colored backgrounds, and the ideas was when we were taking or creating our custom content, we needed to think about the images that we were doing. So you'd have a sort of a zoomy type image, you'd have a flippy type image, and then you'd have a sort of modified type image where you build up the pictures. And we'd use these to help reinforce or create our image across the space. And also it was important, we needed to think about the background colors, because some colors work better than others when we were building it up. The gig, so we would be at one end with our projections. There would be two of us operating the thing, so there'll be two sets of projectors here, two sets of projectors here, and then we'd have our Super 8 and 16mm, and we would project onto this central screen. And ideally the screen would be a thin material, so you'd get your effects on both sides of the screen. And we would interact that with the music. So, for example, there's Carlos. There's an example of one of our nights. I think this is in Brixton Academy. This was our rig. It was built of scaffolding, and you can see all the bits of technology that we were working with, simple technology. And one of the things that we would do is this thing called two-time animation, and then we would build up the event, the panorama, to create these multimedia lighting installations. My time is running out, so I'm going to stop there. So what's the relevance? I think the relevance is that whilst the technology has moved on and the digital technology is easier to work with, the people's reaction to light remains the same, and that's what I learned from doing these projects in Brighton while I was studying. Have we got time? Yeah. Okay. So to give you a feel, really simple. We'd be in front of the projector, we'd have slides each. Oh, we did it.